I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion for approval of, I'm sorry, roll call. I'm just like
You're ready to go.
inches tonight, sorry.
Mr. Kraus.
Here.
Ms. Stamets.
Here.
Ms. Glosser.
Here.
Mr. Lavasser.
Here.
Mr. Valchuk.
Here.
Mr. Amendola.
Here.
Ms. Perry.
Here.
Mayor Bloom is not here. Solicitor Corvall.
Here.
And that's it.
All right. Seeking a motion for approval of the bill list dated September 9th, 2019.
So. Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Motion for approval of the minutes from August 26, 2019.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I only heard 2 A's.
Yeah, but I didn't hear any, I did not hear any, did I ask for no's?
You did?
Okay, and I didn't hear any of those.
Oh. Okay. I thought we all had to respond. I thought we all had to say, yes, or
We could do roll call.
wait for the no. No, I'm not asking for a roll call. I'm just
Okay.
asking
Would you
that
like to be
we
recorded
hear
as
a
abstaining?
response from you.
Okay, all right.
No.
All right, so Philip's gonna abstain. Anybody else wanting to abstain? Okay.
The chair has the privilege to, on voice votes, make a determination of whether the motion passes or not. So, in a situation where folks may be mumbling or being non-responsive that do not vote no, the chair is able to assume that they're voting in the affirmative.
My mistake.
Citizens' comments? Do we have any citizens' comments?
We do not.
Okay, so no citizens' comments. So moving on to the president's report. We have had 2 executive sessions that have been held since the last council meeting to discuss personnel issues, labor negotiations, and real estate matters. I'd like to take a few minutes tonight to talk about executive sessions. Just in point of clarity so that the community understands what executive sessions are and why we have them. Executive sessions are provided for under the Open Meetings Act. Executive sessions are intended to protect and assure confidentiality about sensitive matters. The time spent in executive session is not for formal voting, rather it is time allowed for sorting things out. Per the Act, PA 65, board members cannot take any parliamentary action during an executive session. So the Sunshine Act, open meetings, PA 65, sections 707 allow for executive sessions. An agency may hold an executive session under section 708 relating to executive sessions. 708, executive sessions. The purpose, A, an agency may hold an executive session for one or more of the following reasons: to discuss any matter involving employment, appointment, termination of employment, terms and conditions of employment, evaluation of performance, promotion, or disciplining of any specific current or prospective public officer or employee or current public officer. Number 2, to hold information, strategy, and negotiation sessions related to the negotiation or arbitration of collective bargaining. Number 3, to consider the purchase or lease of real property up to the time an option to purchase or lease the property is obtained, or up to the time an agreement to purchase or lease such property is obtained if the agreement is obtained directly without an option. Number 4, to consult with its attorney or other professional advisor regarding information or strategy in connection with litigation or with issues on which identifiable complaints are expected to be filed. 5, to review and discuss agency business which, if conducted in public, would violate a lawful privilege or lead to the disclosure of information or confidentiality protected by law, including matters related to the initiation and conduct of investigations of possible or certain violations of the law and quasi-judicial deliberations. There are 2 more provisions that do not apply to municipal boards that I won't bore you with. The procedure. Executive session may be held during an open meeting or at the conclusion of an open meeting, or may be announced for a future time. The reason for holding the executive session must be announced at the open meeting occurring immediately prior or subsequent to the executive session. If the executive session is not announced for a future specific time, members of the agency shall be notified 24 hours in advance of the time of the convening of the meeting, specifying the date, time, and location and purpose of the executive session. C, limitation. Official action on discussions held pursuant to subsection A shall be taken in an open meeting. Nothing in this section or section 707 relating to exceptions to open meetings shall be construed to require that any meeting be closed to the public, nor shall any executive session be used as a subterfuge to defeat the purpose of section 704 relating to open meetings. My comments are that rumors about what's going on behind closed doors are often started by people who disregard the confidential nature of information discussed during lawful executive session deliberations, period. And rumors are just that, rumors. Rest assured, any action resulting from legal executive session discussions will be an open session, and there will always be plenty of opportunity for community comment. So moving on to the right to know law, which goes hand in hand with the public's method of accessing information that they want to receive. Interestingly, in the right to know law, section 708, again, applies to exceptions for public records. Exceptions. The following are exempt from access by a requester under this act. Number 10, there are 30 of them. I'm only going to bore you with a couple. A record that reflects A, the internal pre-decisional deliberations of an agency, its members, employees, or officials, or pre-decisional deliberations between agency members, employees or officials and members, employees or officials of another agency, including pre-decisional deliberations relating to a budget recommendation, legislative proposal, legislative amendment, contemplated or proposed policy or course of action, or any research, memos, or other documents used in pre-decisional deliberations. B, the strategy to be used to develop or achieve the successful adoption of a budget, legislative proposal, or regulation. And number 11, a record that constitutes or reveals a trade secret or confidential proprietary information. So I hope that reading this into the record, and I can make this available to any community member that would like to see this in detail, helps the public to understand what the conduct of legal business and the purpose of the executive sessions that you hear us mention. And that's it for my report. Tonight, the big attraction is going to be an update on our comprehensive plan that RJ has spent a lot of time working on, and I'm really looking forward to what she has to say. So we have no mayor, solicitor, do we have a report?
I do not have a report this evening.
Okay, then we're gonna turn it over to you, RJ.
All right, so you're gonna have to wait in suspense a little bit longer, because item B is the special presentation. You really teed me up there with 6 other things on the agenda. So, as usual, the agenda item detail is the first one on there. There's only one voting item on the business agenda, that is a resolution. It's one of those sort of form requesting a grant resolutions that you have to do to submit something. That's sort of towards the bottom of the first section of my manager's report, so I'll go more into detail about what grant exactly we are hoping to request this Friday. So, moving right along into just some quick hit updates here. Fall winter newsletter should be hitting the mailboxes imminently. We sent the approval to the printer last week. You may recall that we decided to do 3 newsletters this year, just because it was sort of a new thing. We were testing out exactly what each issue would cost. We do plan to do them seasonally next year, and we will budget accordingly. But in the meantime, this kind of has a spring-summer wrap-up. It takes us through the rest of the year with certain events, and we will be back in early 2020 with the next edition of the newsletter. Really great feedback this year with bringing it back, so that's been nice to hear. We're glad that everyone has been enjoying it. Tree inventory kickoff. I'm really excited about this one because we've been talking about it for the greater part of this year. So we had the good fortune of partnering with the Penn State Extension campus with their urban forestry program. They were able to secure 2 interns that are going to be walking the borough over about the next month and a half or so, taking a full inventory of the positions, conditions, so on and so forth, of all of the borough's shade trees. They're also going to be mapping those on a GIS database, which from what I understand can actually be accessed by the public, so you can see what tree is where, some other cool little things like carbon footprint reduction, and I don't remember all the stats off the top of my head, but it's something like open PA trees or open tree PA, or whatever it is, we'll put it on the website when it's done. But so this is really important for figuring out how to budget our tree care program going forward, and should give us some different priority levels of what's going on with our shade trees, as well as noting the locations where roots have heaved sidewalks. So that's going to be a really great data collection effort on their part. Really excited to have them get started. The next item is very brief. It's pretty much what it says on the page. We were granted our MS4 waiver through 2025. That's basically MS4, it's an acronym that has 4 S's in it. There's something like municipal storm sewer separation, whatever it is, sanitary sewer. Point being, if you have a separate sewer system, you're subject to MS4 requirements, whereas if you have a combined system, which Crafton does, you are subject to the consent order agreements through Alcosan. So again, because we do not have a completely separated sewer system, we are not exempt to the MS4 requirements, which are certain things about pollution reduction in streams. And so that's good news. That means that we don't have to handle the consent order requirements at the same time as the MS4 requirements, and we are good through, I believe, it's 2025. Just got the letter this week. So the last 2 items on the updates and info section are a little bit longer. The first one is regarding the CDBG grants that we've been talking about for the last couple meetings. So the engineers have, as usual, been a great help in preparing those. We are applying for 3 CDBG Community Development Block Grant projects this year. One for storm sewer inlets along Steuben Street. Another is to continue the ADA ramp upgrade project that we've been applying for the last couple CDBG rounds. Again, kind of in the similar area. That area kind of gets targeted in particular because there are certain income survey requirements for CDBG grants, but they're done by census tract, which is a hard thing to map if you don't see it in front of you. But essentially the idea is sort of the area around Steuben Street and part of the business district. Those areas are not subject to an income survey requirement. They're just declared low, middle income right off the bat, so that, you don't have to go through that process when you're applying for these grants, which is quite a bit of legwork. So that's why we tend to focus those storm and ADA projects in that area. But so we actually were able to put in a third project application for this year, because we're hearing that they're bringing back the demolition money for blighted properties, which for the last couple of years has apparently been a lot more difficult to receive. This is actually a separate pool of money provided to the COG, so it won't be sort of dipping into that same storm inlet and ADA ramp money award pool. But we have got our sights on 52 Baldwick for demolition, so we'll see, if we get the funds for that. It's one of the more expensive properties to take down, but it's certainly quite a visible property, and one that I think we'd be a little safer if we had it not open to be accessed. So, TBD on how the blight demo program goes this year for CDBG as they're sort of bringing it back. We will certainly keep you updated, but the pre-apps were due and were submitted by today. The second one I have on the grant application section is GEDF, Gaming and Economic Development Fund. So this was a grant that wasn't really on our radar necessarily for this year. Typically some of the project costs are required to be over $500,000 that you sort of have to have on deck. We've got quite a few other grant applications out floating in the ether waiting for news back right now. So, that wasn't something that we were necessarily considering applying for it this year. However, our state representative did contact us and asked if we would, basically try and put something together for them to support this year, which is great news. It always helps to have a letter of recommendation from them. But so what we're looking at is, we applied in the spring for a recreation grant through DCED to redo the main park playgrounds. We use mulch essentially, which is not necessarily the recommended safety surface in modern times, not to mention it's expensive. You have to replace it every couple of years. So we applied for about $230,000 in funds for a safety surface, rubberized safety surface with interlocking tiles for the main playground. Now, we were interested in doing this for the other two playgrounds as well, but we kind of bumped up against the grant limit for that particular cycle. So we kind of shelved those for, let's see if we get this grant, and we'll go on and do Little Park and Linwood Park in future years. However, because we can sort of consider this all to have been our original recreation facilities and playground safety project, they said, basically apply for the grant, considering this one grant that we already have in as part of the project cost, and between that cost and sort of the remaining things we have with the safety surfaces, the pool needs a new liner. We had discussed applying for that as well in one grant cycle or the other, but ended up going with the main park safety surface because it was a larger project, greater potential for grant funds. So, including that, the other two safety surfaces, maybe looking at redoing one of the water features in the pool, we should be able to break that $500,000 grant application requirement. So that is due Friday, hence the resolution that is appearing on the voting agenda tonight, just to authorize us to indeed go ahead and request that grant. Again, if we do receive both of these, that's over $500,000 in park upgrades that we'll have put in for, and we'll be completing next year with a pretty small match burden on the borough. So good news there, fingers crossed. The last item in the update section is Tracer Asset Management System. The whole office is really excited about this, actually. So I believe I've mentioned to a couple people in here that we've sort of been demoing asset management software just because we built out the beginnings of a GIS-based system when it comes to code enforcement, tracking some things about properties. But if you don't have the desktop version or somebody that's there to maintain it as it is, it can be not the most user-friendly experience for people who aren't trained in GIS, not to mention the startup costs for buying that software. So there are, thankfully, quite a few companies out there that create data management systems for local governments to track all of your assets. So again, we're talking about shade trees, code enforcement, permitting, sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities, roads, sewers, all of these things. We have the sewers tracked currently through our engineers, and of course code enforcement has been using sort of that raw GIS online map. But this is a lot more sophisticated of a system. We contacted several companies for demos. It turns out that these companies tend to corner the larger municipality, city if you were, market, and so quite a few of them were not in our price range. However, Tracer was, it comes highly recommended by quite a few managers across the state. They do a lot of business both in the western and eastern sides of Pennsylvania. And for the permitting, code enforcement, asset management systems, it's about $10,000 a year of subscription fees. Compare that to some companies that would not quote us because our budget was not over $70,000, and you've got a pretty good deal. So in addition to that, they also take on the licensing fees for your Esri account. That's what GIS uses, that's their access system essentially. Right now we're paying about $2,000 in licenses for people to be able to edit the maps with code enforcement. They just do a flat $500. I assume they have some sort of cost sharing or enterprise pricing, whatever it is. It would essentially be savings of $1,500 from what we're paying right now. Plus the fact that they have all these entry forms, field collection, different types of maps. They build custom forms. I've had that service highly recommended to me by a couple different references and managers that I know. So it just kind of seems like a win-win all around. The proposal's available in the council meeting packet, folder online for anyone that has printed packets. It's there too. They do a rough estimate of sort of data migration and startup costs of $10,000. That's kind of just without them really eyeballing what we have. They're just saying, well, this is what we tend to see, so it could be lower. But so this is kind of what we're planning to go ahead with officially in budget year 2020. However, they are willing to start onboarding us and hold the invoicing until 2020 so that it's officially budgeted for in a line item. So that in particular is the one that is the most complicated item, with some decisions that would need to be made with the contracts. I haven't reviewed the language closely. It might be that it's just month to month, but I imagine it'll probably be an annual basis. So if anyone has any questions right now, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise, I'll come back next meeting with sort of the proposals finalized, and hopefully we can move forward with onboarding that. It's going to be a huge game changer in the office with automating a lot of the reports, citations, notices process, allowing people to collect data in the field a lot more efficiently, especially interns, volunteers, any other activities that we've got going there. So you don't have any.
Yeah. The CDBG, the ADA ramps, they have already been chosen, but we have not been maintaining what we already have installed. Don and Marcia has been bringing this up and bringing it up, and this is so dangerous. Down on the corner of Crennel and Steuben, at the foot of the hill, we have a lot of wheelchairs going down there, and I just want to close my eyes.
Yeah.
It's ripped
Down
down
the wheelchairs cross,
the
people
wheelchair
have gotten out of their cars and stopped the
traffic to get
so that they
this.
can get across the street.
And also, on the left-hand side, the sidewalk is just so small that they can't get done, and especially with all the growth down there on the corner there at that one house. They've been trying to work on it, but they pull it down and then let it sit. But I'm concerned about what we have already in our ADA ramps that are not, and I've seen them about town. I can bring up 5 different ones.
Well,
But
that's
that's the worst.
That's what the project is for
Oh, we have to
upgrading
get
the
it done now.
existing
Yeah.
ones. So,
Isn't it terrible?
And it is, it's not fair.
It's not fair. I mean, yesterday I
You
saw.
can't even get across the street.
No, I saw 3 going down yesterday, and I wanted to just say, wait a minute, folks, I'm gonna come down there to
That's
help
what
you.
people do, they get out to
They
help
do.
their cars.
so regarding that particular ramp, because we've talked about it a couple times, I know which one you're mentioning.
Why is it happening?
So we did originally apply for it through the last CDBG round. It is just outside of that automatic eligibility zone.
It's
So
there already. There's one there, but it's just
right.
not.
So
maintained.
this is the project is not to build new ADA ramps. It's essentially to upgrade you know, the ones that are no longer compliant, for example, in that style. So, because that particular one is right out over one of those, what they call Pittsburgh sewers, you know, Pittsburgh storm inlets that are just sort of flush with the ground. I did ask the engineers to go ahead in between this and the last meeting to just prepare an opinion of cost for it if we just go ahead and do it ourselves, since this has been one that's come up a couple times. It's about $30,000, which includes repairing the storm sewer
Yeah.
in
A
life.
life or 3
I mean,
lives.
when I came on council, the thing was already breaking out. They poured it in the winter. As soon as the spring hit, it all crumbled.
Mhm.
And it
So.
was still under the warranty, and I told Rob, and it didn't get done.
I would say that, you know, based on the fact that we have budgeted the grant matches for the ADA ramp redos in the previous years that we, into the road fund, there certainly, you know, it would be something that the council would take a look at, because it's anything that's a cartway movement, so.
I'm really concerned about what I just heard. So, well, I appreciate what you're saying, but if it was under warranty and we expressed a concern, what was the findings of the company reported?
I'm not familiar with that particular issue.
How long ago did it go in, Marcia, do you
It
remember?
would be,
Before we came on council?
yeah.
So this is going more than 4 years ago.
But if it was a defect and was reported under warranty, what did the company do? Or did no one report it?
We will have to research that since none of us were here at
This
that
is
time.
the first time I've heard that one, but we'll check it out.
Right? I mean,
Because that's what I told Rob right away. I said, it's crumbling down there.
Is Rob here?
And he was, you know,
So, okay, but you're saying it was before we came on council?
it was.
And
whatever
Rob was here already? And who was our manager at the time?
I guess Ann Scott.
No, that
So
would
was
be
that before, or was
she-
that before, well, no, she was here before we came on council. So, pardon?
Yeah, I think that was the time in which the
So we
consultant
will have to
was
research this.
acting as
We'll have to
manager.
research
Like,
this.
it's been 3 years. It's like. it's
But it
this
hasn't been
time.
on, yeah, but it hasn't been on, I mean, as far as the defects, or the reported defects, this is the first we're hearing, we'll research.
Well, it's a good segue because what you're talking about here, we probably need to put in our quality assurance program, in our asset tracking, because we've had other defects with products that we've received over the past decade. And it's difficult for everybody to keep up with them because there's so many moving parts. So if we're able to streamline the management and the inspection aspect of it, I think we'll be able to efficiently and timely address these issues.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the system is super flexible. I mean, you can pretty much build it up to
So
track
the
anything.
takeaways from this discussion are, we're going to research any reports of defects to figure out whether they were actually ever reported to the construction company in the first place, and whether there were any responses. And you have already talked with the engineers about doing cost estimates for the upgrade.
I mean, I could send that out tomorrow.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
kind of
I
percolating
misunderstood.
for the budget.
Okay.
But yeah, it's, I just got it a couple days ago.
So here's, and this may be because it's not a meeting where we have the engineers here. Would this be something that we could get addressed before the end of construction season?
Well, I mean, we could go out to bid. It's
See
not
if we can get
exactly
somebody.
particularly budgeted, but this wouldn't be the first time that we've made an emergency response. So, I mean, if it's really council's
Yeah, I mean, you know,
discretion.
from our perspective, it's emergency response. From the perspective of other people, it's been long in
or
coming.
sole source with the company that did it, assuming there was a defect reported. Maybe we pay the materials and they pay the time.
I would have to even figure out who the company was. I mean, we'll go back and research.
If I'm
it.
not
I just-
mistaken, the
this is
state
new.
put that whole intersection in there. The state paid for that.
It is a state road.
When they put the new lights in and those ramps. and
So
those
did that
buttons.
go in then when you were first on council or
Yeah, I think
before?
so.
Okay, all right. So that gives us some time frame then.
It's a
Between
state
4
road.
and
I
6
mean,
years ago.
I think it was a state project. I think the
Okay.
state paid for all
How
that.
about when we put the hill in, the new hill? That could have
We
been.
put the hill in?
We
What are
did
we
put,
talking-
we did
what are we
put it in the
talking
road.
Brunel Street,
Oh,
Crowton.
West Crafton.
West
Yes.
Crafton,
Technically the bottom of West Crafton.
Yes.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, so we resurfaced it.
Oh, yes.
We
We
resurfaced.
resurfaced that whole thing. It was ripped up for
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
a while.
And time frame on that?
That was
just before I came aboard.
So more than 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so that gives you some, some area to.
Would I that we had
The
a tracer
lights.
6 years
That's
ago
when
that I
the
could
new
look it
lights.
up lickety split?
Yeah, well,
The new lights were
We'll work on it
applicated.
though.
I
We have a
think
lot of
that's a
construction books.
Perfect
so.
example of why a system such as this
absolutely,
is necessary.
absolutely. So, all right, so we're committing to do what we can
Check
very
around
quickly.
2015.
All right,
That's when Bob, whatever his name was, Bob, he was on council.
You mean
He was
manager?
the borough manager.
Yes.
Oh.
Bob what?
Bob Callen.
Callan.
So may have been during John
Callan.
Tran or Bob Callen.
It was Bob
Okay.
Allen. That's when it was.
Yeah, and some of the issues that, if you're talking about the one at the bottom, I mean, so you have the rock salt issue that's going to deteriorate that. So if there,
Mhm.
any claim against workmanship will be defeated by it.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly,
Across the street, held up.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's what the pond, it ponds there.
right.
If you, and that's where the salt ponds, all the, any kind of debris ponds there, it covers the roadway or the, safety surfacing that's there. Public Works constantly has to try to keep that area clean
Is there
because it's just a
utility
natural
pole or something
swale.
right there as well? I'm trying to remember, there's some other,
Yeah, there's a piece of, there's a pole.
yeah, so that's another issue too, when because I have,
Not right where that's deteriorated.
no, but
No,
what I'm
it's
saying is the whole
same area.
navigation is that you have the ramp, then you've gotta get around the pole and then up and
And down
that
another
whole
one
area
and up
is,
And up,
Yeah.
right.
so,
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a difficult intersection. It's
Yeah.
maybe the
and the
sidewalk
thing
is
is
thin.
it is actively used by handicapped people. We've all
Always.
seen them, we know who they are, and they use it every
They
day.
go every day to eat dinner because they're both not able to cook, and that's their way, any way down there.
Considering that we have asked the St. Philip's folks to park in the lot, and then we, at the very outset of that lot, have a broken ADA ramp. We should
That's
make
not where it is.
Yeah, but,
in that
all
vicinity.
right. Okay, I think we've got enough information to do what research and to move forward with seeing what the possibilities are.
I'll ask the engineers to come prepared at the next meeting,
Okay.
the report to talk about how to move forward. Yeah,
Thanks.
All right,
I have questions on Tracer.
hit me.
We're not maintaining this thing, are we?
Hmm?
It's cloud, it's somebody.
Oh,
right,
oh,
right,
yes,
right.
yes.
So we don't have any IT,
No.
we don't pay any maintenance.
That's all included, anything under 2 hours is free.
So we're paying a license that is to renew each year, not
right.
Monthly
Two.
currently is the pay schedule, so. yeah.
sure.
But probably, yeah.
Yeah, they'll renew you every 3 years or every year or whatever
Mhm.
you have approved. So we don't do any upgrades, it's all their software, we just use it. Do we own the data?
Yes.
We're sure of that?
It's exportable to spreadsheets, GIS, everything. We'd have to import what we do have in code enforcement already anyway.
And since they're so
And we will
popular.
double check that with any
Oh,
agreement.
absolutely, but I mean,
Solicitor
it's,
has
yeah.
to do his
I
job.
haven't been provided with it, but be happy to.
It is, yeah, I'll send that to you.
Is this multi-tenant?
What?
No, I'm sure it's software as a service because she said it's in a cloud.
Oh, yes, it is indeed,
So
SaaS.
we have to work partitioned, we're not
Okay.
playing anyone else's sandbox, so that wouldn't make sense, but you can ask.
Yeah.
Do you know what that question is?
I mean,
Yeah,
it
I
says
do.
SaaS on the contract, so, yeah.
And the last one is, since they're so popular in Pennsylvania, do the vendors that we work with currently use it?
Vendors as in, like,
Our code people, our
Oh.
code people?
oh,
Would they have any use?
well, I'd have to ask them, but we can pretty much, I mean, well, first of all,
I know
let's step back for a
Last time I had a
second.
meeting with them, they said they weren't using it.
We should step back for a second, in that our contract with our building inspectors
Mhm.
is basically an 80-20 split. So
Mhm.
we retain 20% of the fees that are paid, and then for that, we do the administrative work, so data entry, preparing the permits, sending them out. So that's already something that our staff does.
So the work we
in-house.
do becomes more profitable,
Yes.
essentially.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'd be much quicker
Right.
and much easier to track.
And since they are so popular in Pennsylvania, do they have a user community here?
Do you mean, well, North Fayette uses them, I can tell you that
Like,
for sure.
they get together and they talk about using the software as
Oh,
town.
well, I'd have to ask, but it came recommended to me directly by a couple other managers, so I'm sure
I
we
think
can,
it's fantastic,
you know,
thank you.
yeah.
Anybody got anything else at this point? We'll be talking more about that at the next meeting, you
Sure,
said?
yeah.
Okay,
Give Steve some time to check it out.
okay.
The wood at the stage, is that gonna be fixed this year, or?
Pardon?
The wood at the stage on the park, the top of it's all rotted and done. Is that gonna be replaced at all?
I don't think that that's on any plan at this point.
I will ask Rob and follow up the next meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Excuse me while I make my notes.
All right.
You do want to check into, a SaaS can be multi-tenant.
Yes,
so-
I understand that, Philip, and I will make sure. And usually they are multi-tenant, pretty much by standard.
Is there any particular question you want me to ask the proposal team?
Well, we'll just ask if, you'll ask if it's multi-tenant. We'll talk about what it is and whether it matters or not.
Ask
Well,
if it's
So,
multi-tenant.
yes.
The reason why I'm asking is, hopefully, all versioning of application rolls out, because I've been in situations where you buy an application and they start doing you start out with configurations, and then it turns into customizations, and then your tenants see.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. And that's why most real SaaS applications have a core of multi-tenancy so that their core upgrades.
I
go
understand.
everywhere.
It's the fourth thing listed on their website, so you don't need to.
Oh, thank you. I
Thank you.
haven't had a chance to look that deep because,
Just looked it up, so we're good.
thank you.
Thank you. All right,
Okay, moving on.
star of the show tonight. Three, coming that way. Sorry, Steve, you're skipping me this time. I did not have time to bind it all up.
Somewhere in here is a vision statement.
Yeah, for you.
And to answer your question, Eric, we are finishing binding these this afternoon, so the document will be on the website. It's covered.
So as soon as
It's a little bit of a break.
Just keep
Adventure in binding today, All right, so this is what we've been talking
How
about.
many more of those?
I can make more.
I mean, do you have any right now?
No.
No.
Here's one over here.
Okay. I just wanted to see if anyone in the audience.
We're
wanted-
missing the
Oh,
mayor.
this is,
Wanted to
right,
take a
so,
look
but
at it.
I knew he wasn't coming, so we did not bind one today. But again, this will be readily available on the website tomorrow. Who is missing their copy now?
It was the mayor's copy?
No, I had enough for all of you.
I don't know. Whose copy?
You just gave it away.
No,
Was it-
that's,
Oh, no, hold
No.
on, that's hers. It's hers. It's hers. You need it too.
Okay, so basically what RJ is saying is that this report will be made available on the website for anyone who is interested in seeing it in detail when we're through. So did I
it
get
would be
that?
on now, except I scanned the last page again, so it was typo. So,
Okay, all right.
good news, it's fixed
So
in
it'll
all
be
the
on by
physical
tomorrow.
files. That's what I was doing 10 minutes ago. So, Crafton Comprehensive Plan 2019 Progress Report, here you go. I'm just gonna walk through very briefly because, you know, there's some stuff to digest here. It just came out to council right now, so I don't expect anybody to know the content of it to ask specific questions right now. It's certainly something that we can discuss, you know, in the coming meeting.
Before you start, just so everyone has context in the room, what is this that we're looking at, about how long?
Sure, so I'm just gonna hold it up for the viewers at home. So, this is an idea that was generated, you know, a month and a half or so ago. basically because there were some different questions about, you know, where are we on different areas of the comp plan? What do we still have to do? You know, maybe what should our priorities be in the coming years? You know, what the next remainder of the term of the comp plan. From my understanding, the document was created to span about 5 years as sort of an implementable comprehensive plan. That's a little short for what I think see comp plan terms to be, but you know, that's kind of the nature of the document. It was written to be sort of first step groundwork things that the boroughs could do immediately, as well as a couple longer term things, you know, that were sort of put at the end, like consider a streetscape, which yes, we should. However, that's quite a few years, you know, of process to even start planning. So anyway.
And so this plan was adopted in
I- no, that's fine, because I realized midway through that I should probably mention. The comprehensive plan, Crafton Ingram Thrive, was adopted midway through 2017. So we're coming right up on, if I can do math, which, you know, it's 8 o'clock, so debatable, but we're coming right up on the midway point of that sort of 5-year general scope. So it's kind of seemed like a good time to sort of go, all right, well, you know, where were we? What have we done? Where are we now? And where do we need to go? What are the areas where we have the most need? What are the areas which we've done really well? So, you know, there's, again, for the viewers at home, you will be able to see this on the Borough website. There's a table of contents, an introduction that kind of lays out some of the information that I just gave, as well as a explanation of what follows, which is section by section, a point by point breakdown of all of the goals and objectives included in the 2017 comp plan. They're broken down into the same sort of strategy organization that each section took. Of course, the 4 priority areas as identified by community feedback sessions were deteriorating properties, or shorthand version, blight. Economic commercial development, let's call it economic development, that sounds a little more like what we're trying to get at here. Connectivity and walkability on the subject of ADA ramps, and communications. Now, it's important to remember that this plan was done in conjunction with Ingram Borough, so therefore, you know, the community feedback came from Crafton as well as Ingram. There are some things that we kind of had done when we were starting the comp plan process. There are some things that I'm sure Ingram had accomplished that we had not at the beginning. So, you know, realistically, I can only tell you what Crafton's done. I'm not Ingram's borough manager, and that's up to them. We certainly, you know, have the door open for collaboration on any services that make sense or are appropriate for the borough scope, self-determination, budget, and so on and so forth. The last section is just a brief, I suppose, if you call a 1.5 pages of text brief, but hey, you know, shorter than some of the grad school reports I'd write. So the last section is a brief discussion of sort of what the findings were, what capacity, you know, the staff have to carry things out, where we really need help, particularly with the connectivity and walkability section. Because that's not really something that you can take on while you're sitting at a desk. And just sort of general 10,000-foot takeaways for each of the priority areas moving forward. So at the beginning in the table of contents, it does mention this, but I essentially color-coded everything and also used symbols just in case, you know, the colors are tough for anybody to see. Where, you know, if it's green and it's got a check mark, Crafton has achieved or completed the strategic goal. If it's got a open checkbox, that's probably fairly intuitive, we're still working on it, where I will provide, you know, details if appropriate as to how we're working on it. And then a couple of them actually got flagged as orange, which is this goal is not appropriate or realistic for implementation this time, given Crafton's community context, immediate needs or resources, so further consideration is needed before we move forward. There were really just a few that were particularly like, you know, take on joint code enforcement with Ingram, which, you know, and I certainly are happy to support their code enforcement, but we really need a dedicated staff member here. It's tough to share those essential services. That's just one example. You know, there are really only a handful in there. But, you know, you'll find that particularly in the economic development and communication sections, we've knocked out quite a bit of those. There are 2 ways to look at that. One is that we've done a whole heck of a lot, which is true. You know, it's been 2.5 years since this was adopted, but also that, you know, these were really a lot of first step goals. And so therefore, you know, you wouldn't expect to see something in this plan that was a 20-year process for turning everything on its head and total revitalization of the business district and this and that, but it is laying the groundwork, and we've done a lot of that. Connectivity and walkability, not so much, it's tough, we really need volunteer help in that section. Deteriorating properties, we could use on-the-ground data collection for that as well, which will loop into the asset management system that we're going to be onboarding, so. I don't want to go on and on and on, although there's quite a bit to digest in here, so I could. But if anyone has any sort of upfront questions about this, I'm happy to take them. And, you know, in the meantime, I'll let you all take this home, think about it, or not, you know.
Are there either any, do you want to do a high-level walkthrough or jump to the analysis?
Well, it's really, I guess, what the group would prefer I go through. I think that, well, I'll point out that the last page of each section is just a remaining goals and objectives, where I pull out all of the open check boxes and categorize them sort of as they were under strategies, so you can see the things that are still left. Discussion and analysis section, I mean, I guess the short version there is, you know, we've added a lot of capacity in the last year between bringing on a code enforcement officer. You know, part of my skill set, my specialty is economic development, so therefore that's a really significant jump forward in our capacity that we didn't necessarily have at the time that the comp plan was drafted. However, you know, there's only so many things that you can do in a day, and although the admin team is working really well together and leverages the time that we have available pretty well because of that, you know, there are certain challenges with things like, again, connectivity and walkability, data collection on the ground, unless you can find an intern, of which, you know, sometimes they're in short supply for local government. And we have a couple, thankfully, working on the shade tree inventory. We've had a few over the last year, but, you know, they can only do so much. Same thing for volunteers. We have a really great core group of volunteers. You know, I see some in the audience right now. They're the people that always show up. But they can only do so much too. And so I think that a really important part of accomplishing some of the sections that have a lot less checked off, you know, is finding sort of that next generation of volunteers, and where people are willing to step up and say, okay, you know, this is, we see that there's a need here. You know, people are interested in a lot of things. There's some things that people think are more fun, some things that people are less interested in, but if everybody gravitates to one particular event, you know, if that's their thing, or one policy area, the other stuff still doesn't get done, and we need it to get done. So this is kind of my bat signal for people that are willing to walk the borough and map out some of those features with the new system, where we can really use help on data collection. But I mean, that's just one particular area to highlight. Overall, I think, you know, I'll just read the last sentence before I get into the little quick takes for each section, which is Crafton's community leaders should take pride in the results of this report, because midway through and midway point sounds just about right. So.
So, this is a lot to digest at one time.
Okay.
So what I'm wondering is whether council might like to have some time to review, and then maybe over the upcoming couple of meetings, we take a piece at a time and go in more detail and have a more detailed discussion. Any comments,
This is great.
questions?
You did a nice job. You know, it really brings out our vision, especially, you know, that last page. It's good, you did a nice job.
Thanks.
So how would we like to leverage this document in coming meetings?
What's the question again?
Okay, there are 4 sections.
How do we want to talk about this?
How do we want to talk about this? How do we, you know, throw it at us? She did a great job, yay, yay. There's a lot here. There's a lot here, and so I'm thinking that, you know, instead of just throwing it out, saying yay, yay, and anybody can download it, that as a council, we spend some time over the next few meetings, taking maybe one section at a time and talking about it in more detail.
I think we should take one section at the next 4 meetings. because then we could, it wouldn't take a whole meeting to go over. It wouldn't be, having people walking up because it's so long.
So long.
Just do one and really concentrate on it, come up with the questions that they would have, answers, or how we would. And just each meeting, make it a short,
Okay, Eric?
that works, yeah.
I guess what I would say is, I would strongly urge that we have time, formal time allotted in the next meeting for public comment on what you're going to publish tomorrow. I think it needs to be made very clear to people that this is their plan, and they need to come and talk about it, or if
So
you
then
could-
we would
if you
do,
could create another forum for those of us that are unable to attend. Maybe it's a Google form,
Yeah.
or something along those
We
lines.
can just pop a submission form on the website.
That would be, I think, very useful.
so then because it will be on the agenda,
Mhm.
it is naturally open to community comment, because of, each section that will be on that, but we will make a special point.
Yeah, I would
But I
go
just want
further
to
than the
underline.
dotted line. Yeah, that's right. I agree with what you're saying, but I go further than that,
Okay.
yeah. I also think that, I don't think we need to do one section per meeting. I think that if everyone reads all the words, it's 27 pages, it's not gonna be a night's reading. If we all read the words and come back to the next meeting, and whatever you've taken an interest in, maybe we could make small committees up to talk about what are some concrete strategies to do on each of these things at the next meeting, and not a month, 2 months from now.
I mean, there are, to
Any
that
comments,
note,
anybody else? Thank you.
Historic
Thank you.
committees don't work out very well.
Well,
People don't show up, people,
Well, it's a committee of 2, right? I'm sure you and I would get lots together done.
there are recommended, working groups for certain sections that were kind of just associated with how the original comprehensive plan
So
wrote
we
about
started, Brad has got
the beat
the
committee.
started up again, so that would be a good thing for them to look at and come back with. Anybody else got any other thoughts?
I'd love to own communications if we just want to divide it up and each own a section right now.
Okay.
It is pretty much done, just FYI, so, but hey, the welcome wagon package thing, that is the one item in there that really there's a call for
Yeah.
volunteers
Can
on,
I
so.
jump in off Eric's point and just clarify? So we are on the same page. The green is what is done,
Yes.
okay. And the blue is still to be done?
Yes.
Work in progress.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't use different colors for, hey, this is what we're already doing, but
That's
we can't
just-
check it off
Just
yet.
wanted to make sure I was, so. Nothing, thank you.
Okay, so are we basically in agreement with this approach to go in more detail? And Brad, you, by nature of working on the beat committee, will focus your attention and comments on that section?
Among others, yes.
Okay, so just kind of who's going to take ownership of the various sections?
Yeah.
And Eric, you've committed to communications. Would anybody like to delve into or kind of be the leader on the economic development side? For a group that was really interested in knowing what we've done, nobody seems to be terribly interested tonight.
I'll take the connectivity and walkability.
Okay.
I can also take the economic development if you'd like me to take 2.
All right, why don't you do that?
That would be just fine.
All right, okay. So we're committing to reading this over and at least getting through 2 of them next meeting. And
With the goal of the facilitator then leading us through some concrete strategies that we can do something about, correct?
strategies that we can look at going forward for our next 2.5 years. So that when we reach the end of this, the life of this document, that we have got a significant portion of it accomplished and know what we still have left to do. And have a good look at what may have changed that would give us a launching point for the next 5-year vision.
Hopefully 10-year next time, these are expensive. 10 years is a little more
really
standard, to
fast.
be clear.
Yeah.
5 years is quite short for a comp plan.
All right.
What is the date of that next meeting?
Yeah.
The 23rd of September.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments?
So deteriorating properties is led by Brad, walkability is Alice, and then I'm taking economic development and communications. Anyone want to volunteer to help? Anyone?
I'll help you with economic
Thank you.
development.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're on the planning commission, so that's kind of the group that's
That's great.
cited as being the hub in that section.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, shall we move on to our business agenda? Thank you, RJ, for pulling this together.
Wonderful.
All right. Seeking a vote for administration, we're seeking a motion to approve resolution 2019-12, requesting a grant from the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County, RAAC, via the Gaming and Economic Development Fund for recreation facility improvements and safety upgrades.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, any questions, any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. So on the concurring resolution, I don't see a dollar amount. Do we,
I
from
mean,
the
it's not
conversation
finalized
sounds it's in the air?
yet, but it's gotta crack 270,000 essentially.
Okay,
It will be slightly over that.
okay, thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? Let's take a roll call vote if there aren't.
All right, Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Damitz?
Yes.
Ms. Glasser?
Yes.
Mr. Lavasser?
Yes.
Mr. Valchef?
Yes.
Mr. Amendola?
Yes.
And Ms. Perry?
Yes. Motion
7-0.
passes. All right, moving on, does anyone have any new discussion items for this evening? Philip?
Yeah, with regards to the parking lot in the back, did we get the information on the lease yet and what the future is of that piece of property?
Well, we have not gotten the information from Mike on the lease itself. And there's ongoing discussion on that with the intention to see what can be done.
And did we resolve the piece that is our piece that has signage, what the dynamic is?
Well, I certainly heard the history
Can
of that.
I motion that we create a parking lot committee to organize a comprehensive status of that property? Is that gonna be a little bit easier, because it seems like there's a lot of questions and there's just in pieces right now. Can we get that maybe put together?
Well, I'll entertain a motion. Does anybody want to second that motion?
We're in the middle of another motion, aren't we?
No, we were not. We
We're done with
were
that one.
having a discussion. We were moved on to discussion items. Philip has asked questions about the status of the parking lot, which is primarily owned by the volunteer fire department. There have been initial discussions. They've said they'd like to get out of the parking lot business. It's under lease at this point, we know for several more years.
So I can provide a little bit of information that I've had through, verbal discussions, but.
Well, do we have a motion?
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
So now we can go.
Okay, did you second?
Yes, I second it.
All right.
So I was just gonna answer is.
Yeah,
Go ahead and answer the question.
Okay. So, the fire chief has mentioned that there is some sort of lease document between the borough and the fire department. In addition, to the Port Authority, or some sort of legal document. I mean, it's gotta be several years old, you know? It's not something that I know exactly where to find,
It's not
but
our
we're looking for it. But the verbal history that I received was essentially that the spaces that are over by the bar and the library, which appear to be on the borough-owned parcel, technically, the way that this worked is the Port Authority leased the parking lot for a certain number of spaces for them, you know, dollar amount per space, it was flat, paid up front. However, the fire department traded the spaces on the borough-owned parcel by the library and the bar for the spaces that are directly along the municipal complex.
So
Plus a
that
couple
on
extra
paper,
for
we
us.
own it, but somewhere along the line, there was an agreement made
Right.
to flip what spaces we
Sounds
control.
like we need an FAQ.
Yes. So, and I mean, like, I'll just be honest up front right now, it's gonna take us stop, dropping everything to dig around for these documents, because we've already looked, and they're not regularly readily in front of us. That doesn't mean they don't exist.
Hasn't provided them.
So just so I can understand, since we're debating the efficacy of the parking lot committee and the purview of that committee, so if that committee in question wanted to find the lease for the, ostensibly the parcel they'd be tasked with finding more information about, they would not be able to find it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Unless we can get
At
it out of
this
the
time,
volunteer
that is
fire
my
department.
concern. I don't
Okay.
wanna guarantee, but you know.
So, now, the fire department doesn't have this piece of information?
They
It's
have not
I was
provided a copy.
referred that we should have it somewhere.
Well, I guess my concern with the parking lot is, it's obviously aging, it's deteriorating, it's becoming a safety issue as that surface deteriorates. And, you know, I like to make it very clear whose liability it is to maintain and keep it up. You know, what part is ours truly to maintain and what part is another entity? And I think we need to do our due diligence and figure that out, just for safety's sake. And outside of any other speculative nature, you know, just the maintenance responsibility and how we're going to budget for that. If it's our responsibility or whatever entity, or if part of this, you know, again, concept that came up with the transfer of that property to the borough is sort of to shift the liability because it's an asset that's been depreciated and needs reinvestment, et cetera, and what type of reinvestment is required, and it's all gonna play into the economics of that decision. But my principal concern is the safety issue with the surface as,
Well, at this point, the responsibility would fall on the volunteer fire department who owns that property.
well, which part, but from what I understand,
The
we own.
majority of it.
Right, I understand majority, let's say they own 90% of it, and somebody falls on the 10% that's ours, you know, hey, let's at least make sure we're taking care of 10% that's ours and plan accordingly. That's,
May I suggest that we continue hunting for these
Yeah.
fire lease documents and then provide them to council to form a committee?
Yes.
I don't have an opinion, as much as I'd have thought that if we're not able to locate the lease documents, we may want to reach out to Port Authority to obtain that lease
Yeah.
document. They may have it more readily available
They-
than we or the fire department.
Right, but that alone will not address Philip's concern about
That's a
which part do
second.
we really
Yeah.
control.
This may be a separate document from the.
It could be.
Authority lease document, from what I hear, but, you know, I mean.
Sometimes lawyers attach related agreements as exhibits, so my
Oh,
hope
that's right,
was
yeah.
maybe
The Port Authority was,
we'll thread the needle and you get everything you need. But
I
who
can
knows?
send that email tomorrow.
I'm concerned, you know, there's easily 100 cars a day that come through here that live in maybe the borough and other places, and their first impression of Crafton is that parking lot. I wonder if that's our best foot forward we can put as a community. We've all been in that parking lot, and will be so tonight. I think that having a group that puts together a list prioritizing questions that we definitely don't know the answer to right now will help in terms of the fact-finding that you're doing and the overall questions we want to answer for. Like, who's going to maintain it, who's responsible for things. Lots of questions underneath those questions. I
So
think-
what you're saying is that this committee would be responsible to formulate the questions
Mhm.
and figure out how to get the answers?
That's a great idea.
All right, anybody got any other conversation?
As to the motion that we have on the
Yes.
floor. I would have to agree with Mr. Amendola that sometimes committees don't work, and that a dearth of committees may not be as transparent as some folks would like them to be. So I think that this is an issue that's actually outlined in the economic development section of the comprehensive plan update that we have before us tonight. And if a large portion of the comprehensive plan indicates that we should be focusing on a Main Street vision, then I think we should have that discussion out in the open with community involvement as much as possible, since ostensibly the Main Street would be in that corridor. I do agree with the councilman's overarching objectives, that the questions do need to be answered, they do need to be brought up. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
All right, shall we vote? Roll call.
Mr. Kraus?
No.
Ms. Dammits?
Wait a minute. Read the motion again, okay?
Aye.
You know, he wanted to form a committee and made a motion to
To
form a
form a
committee or
committee, a
something?
parking lot committee. That's.
So
there
that's
was
what we're
no
voting
more-
on? I thought we were in the middle of another motion.
What other motion did you
Well,
think we were? No, we finished, Fred, we finished the resolution 2019-12. That was 100%.
Okay,
That's done. We moved on to discussion. Philip brought
so
up.
this motion came out of the discussion, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
All right.
Ms. Dammits?
Yes.
Ms. Glosser?
No.
Mr. Lavasser?
Yes.
Mr. Valchef? I
Yes.
think you're gonna vote yes, probably. Mr. Amendola?
No.
Ms. Perry?
No.
4-3. Motion does not carry.
Who's going to
At
put
the
together
same
questions?
time, at the same time, we commit to continuing to look for these documents and to be transparent and as speedily as possible, get more information about this situation.
I think it went back to when Mayor Stewart was here. and
Yes, he
put
was.
in the bus line.
1996 when
Was that when it was finally put in? That's how far back it went.
Like,
Because it was the agreement
Pardon?
of putting in that bus and where were they going to park if we could make this stop here in Crafton. And then it was at that time that they agreed to do this parking lot and also the KSC.
Madam President,
But I don't remember the year. But it's went back when Mayor Stewart was here.
Okay.
1996.
Was it?
Okay.
Blaine Lucas was.
So we will provide an update at the next meeting of the results of the hunt.
yeah, I would like to ask this body to consider having an executive session and then future time, where we would ask the fire chief to come in and just basically.
He is actually asked to talk to council, and we are planning to have him at the next meeting.
Okay.
Are there things that you think
Well,
we should discuss
in
in
the
executive
You
session?
might have all the answers to the questions that everybody here is
Well,
looking for.
I can tell you that RJ has been asking and has not gotten responses. So
Right,
maybe
well-
he'll bring them to council.
I meant in the, about the specificities of the lease itself, and then come out on the floor and basically divulge whatever information we can out of the purview of the executive session.
The lease is public.
Yeah, the lease is a public lease. It's,
Right.
it's in
Right.
fact, it's
Even
not a
There's a trade
negotiation.
underneath it.
Even better.
Yeah,
So,
so
if we
he's
could ask
asked,
Mike to
he's
come
asked,
down
to-
here?
he's asked to present.
Right,
We've agreed to have him at the next meeting.
great.
Okay. Any other discussion items tonight?
Just a couple questions, I know the engineer's not here, but with regards to the demolition on Crafton Boulevard, how's that coming along?
I believe that we spoke sometime last week where the contractor was getting his final inspection from the county so that he could proceed. I was told probably within 2 weeks. I have to go check the exact date, but we're probably coming right up on that 2 weeks.
Okay, and then when do you anticipate the 2019 programs kicking off? Is Mealy?
Yeah, so the last update that we got from our engineer at the last meeting was that he was anticipating close to the end of this month. It seems that we've been delayed again.
When is it too late to do it?
We asked that question at the last meeting, and they said that there should be enough time.
Because, you know, moving so late, you know, I still not happy. I don't know if we even signed off on the final pay for the Clearview project, phase 5, but, you know,
We have not.
okay, because the patches that they did around the manholes, in my opinion, are inferior. I personally called up the engineer and Engineer Minstrom, and I raised concerns with that, and going into a late, fall paving situation is not ideal.
So
I
are
agree.
you suggesting we look into the possibilities of pushing to early next year and foregoing
Well, I
this
think
year?
we have to have a drop dead day. I mean, if we get to like October 20th and they pushed it, then, I mean, I think we have to be serious
Right.
about it.
So would this be something that you would have looked at, the contract, or,
I've not,
okay?
but we would need to
Yeah.
look at it. to
The,
see.
the bid docs are in a large green screwed together binder that I can
Yeah.
provide to you. They're not typically something we get PDFs of, or else you.
Right, so,
But we can figure it out.
so maybe we can talk to the engineers to discuss what our
Yeah.
options are?
I mean, there's usually like a
Yeah, it just depends on how quickly.
It's all about the weather.
Yeah.
Right, I know the
I've
temperature,
said
we're gonna have to watch this.
Pavement in November.
I mean, we've certainly had paving programs that have started later. It's not ideal. It's not what I would prefer. Our original start date was sometime towards the end of July. But of course, the summer was pretty ugly with how much rain they got, and I'm assuming that the issue here is that there are other paving projects that keep pushing around, and so, you know, we were kind of caboose,
Worth
so,
monitoring.
you know.
Right.
I'm
So we
concerned.
will have the engineer at the next meeting.
Yep.
Will you ask him to take a look, address that, and speak to
If we
those
aren't
questions?
starting within the week of the next meeting, I will be quite concerned, so.
Well, let's have the engineers talk to us about that at the next meeting. Anything else? All right, well, let's move on to community announcements. All right, I will. So, the big thing on our announcements is the pop-up event that will be held Sunday, October 6th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Noble Avenue will be closed to vehicles from the intersection of Bradford Avenue and Crennel. The intersections will remain open to traffic and become a pedestrian-friendly space with activities for all ages. Green pop-up features to help visualize what a streetscape could look like, and the official launch of our I Love Crafton Business District branding. Business participants and activities are still being finalized. Speaking to that, I had the opportunity this afternoon, and will be taking time over the next few days to visit with our business owners in the corridor and inviting them and encouraging them to take part in this activity. And they all seemed pretty excited about it. So I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot of our local businesses being represented in various ways. And for anyone, if you own a local business in the downtown district, areas surrounding Noble Avenue, East Crafton, Crennel and Crafton Boulevard shops, and are interested in setting up a table to promote your business or do some other fun activity that brings attention to your business, please contact the Borough Administration Office at 412-921-0752. And direct outreach to local businesses, as I said, has begun this week. I've been visiting about 10 this afternoon and expect to get them all in the next few days. Any additional citizens' comments? If you come forward, name and address.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Here?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Lisa Smith, I live at 50 Walnut Street. I was just listening to what you were saying about needing volunteers to do the connectivity and the walkabout. Did you guys ever think about calling down and talking to the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, St. Philip's, the National Honor Society up at Carlington? All these kids need volunteer hours, they need them bad. This can also work for Girl Scouts getting their gold badge and Boy Scouts looking to do their Eagle Scout project. They could map this stuff out for you. If you're looking for volunteers, you have a whole community that is willing to help you out and looking for volunteer hours, and you need to tap into that.
Okay, if you'd like to provide the phone numbers
I
of
can
the
do that, I can email
contact
them to you
people,
tomorrow.
that would be great. Please email
Oh,
them to RJ.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
great.
All right, the next thing, just maybe, what is being demolition on Crafton Boulevard?
I believe it is 1656.
1656. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
That's a quick question.
Sure.
Before, Madam President, did you get a phone call from, is it?
Are you talking
Miss-
about Pat from
Yes.
from Hawthorne Church?
Yes.
Yes, and I have spoken with her. I let her know about the tree inventory, and I committed to making sure that I stayed in touch with her.
Okay, so I guess my question is, what is the path forward for dealing with the sidewalk issues that are
I think that that's going to come, as I said to her, I think that that will come out of the tree inventory and the information that we receive, and then we will be discussing what potential options there are. So, and she was happy that I returned her call and that I committed to continuing to connect with her. And I expect once we have this finished and we have some thoughts about ways forward, I would expect to volunteer to have the manager and myself go speak to that group to talk about possible
So we have to
possible
wait, so
solution.
we know we have an issue, we have an ordinance on the book, and we have to wait for the
We have an
inventory?
ordinance about shade trees. We do not have an ordinance about anything else. And there are
We have
many,
impairments.
Philip, as you well know,
Correct.
there are many situations like that in this borough. And we are going to get an inventory. We're 30 days away from having that inventory complete. We're starting it this week. And once we have it, we will have a clear and quantifiable picture. And from there, we can have substantive discussions and figure out solutions.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Anything else? Meeting adjourned.